So now what I'd like to do is create a filter navigation at the top over here so we can filter the projects by completed or by ongoing, which would be the red one, or by all, so we show all of them. So the first thing to do is create a component for this, and I'm going to create it in components over here and call it filter nav.view. Okay, so let's type out view and press enter to get this boilerplate, and let's do the template first. I'm going to do a nav with a class of filter-nav so we can style it later on, and inside I want 3 buttons. I want a button for all, I want a button for viewing completed, and a button for viewing ongoing. So let's create a button first of all, and we'll say view all. Now then, I want to attach a click event to this to update the filter. So what I'll do is say @click and set that equal to a method called update filter. Now I don't have that method down here, so I'm going to create it by saying methods, and inside that I'm going to create one called update filter, like so. Now what I want to do is pass in an argument into this, and that argument is going to be something like all, because I want to update the projects that we show, but I want them to be all the projects, so I can check for that value later on. So I'm going to do something very similar for the other buttons, and in fact what I'm going to do is return this onto a new line, and sometimes I do this when I'm attaching a few things to an element so it's more readable. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it down here a couple of times. So this time, instead of view all, we will say completed, and this time the argument is going to be completed, and then down here it will be ongoing, the argument, if I can spell it, and over here it will be ongoing. So we have 3 buttons, right? And when we click on one of those buttons, we fire this update filter method, and we pass in an argument to say what we want to filter by. So we can take that in as an argument here. I'm going to call it by because that's what we're filtering by, but you can call it what you want. Now at this point what I'd like to do is emit an event, because I want to listen for that event in the home component where we're eventually going to nest the filter nav, so I can react to that filter changing. And when I react to that filter changing, it's at that point that I can go ahead and filter the project based on that criteria. So I'm going to say this dot $emit to emit an event. I'm going to call the event filter change, and I'm also going to pass some data, and that is the by argument. So whatever this value is right here. So if I click on this one, it will be completed. If I click on this one, it will be ongoing. And then when I listen for that event over here, I can use that bit of information to determine how to filter these projects. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and now I want to drop it into this component. So first of all, we need to import it. So I'm going to duplicate this and change single project to filter nav, and then I need to register it here, filter nav, and I want to put it inside this template. So it's going to go at the top inside the home div like this, filter nav. Okay then, so remember we have to listen for that filter change event. So I'm going to say @filter change and set it equal to something. Now this thing that we want to set it equal to, all I want to do is basically track what that value is. So I'm going to store a value down here called current, and that is basically the current filter. And to begin with, I'm going to say it's all. That is the default filter. So when we first load the page, we're going to show all projects. So that's the current one. And all I'm going to do inside here is update that value, because if we click on this button, for example, then we're going to emit the filter change event, and we're going to pass this argument up as the data. So what I'd like to do is set then current to completed to whatever data we pass up. So let's do that. I'm going to say current is equal to $events, and this $event, that is the data that we send up right here. When we send up data, we can access that right here, and it's called $event. So I'm setting it equal to that value, and this will now update. Now what I want to do is just preview this in a browser, and we can see it doesn't look great. So I'm going to apply a few styles to this now, which I'm just going to copy from my repo. So let's paste those in down here. And all we're doing is styling the buttons inside the filter nav. So they have no background, no border, a color of this gray color, no outline, a small font size, uppercase, bit of margin right to space them out, a letter spacing, a font weight of bold, and a cursor of pointer so we know to click them. If we save that again and look at it, all right, cool. So we can see that now. So every time we click one of these now, we are emitting an event and sending that data, which is either all, completed, or ongoing. And we're accepting that event over here, listening for it. And when that occurs, we set the current filter equal to whatever value we emit right here, either all, completed, or ongoing. So now we're tracking what the current filter is inside this property. We're not filtering any projects yet, but we are tracking it inside that property. So every time we click on one of those, we're changing that current property. All right. Now, in this lesson, I want to do one more thing, and that is to send this as a prop, this current value, into the filter nav, because then what I could do is I could style the buttons conditionally based on that prop. So if something is active, for example, if the value of current is all, and we receive that as a prop inside this, I can check, look, is the value of current or the prop equal to all? If it is, I'm going to style it a bit different because this would be the active class. If it's completed, I want to style this one to be the active filter. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to send it in as a prop over here by doing some data binding, and we're going to send in a prop called current and set it equal to be current, which is this thing. And remember, that changes every time we click on a different filter. So if I save that and come over here, I can accept it as a prop by saying props and current, like so. Now I want to conditionally output some different classes based on this value. So let me come to each button, and I'm going to go to the next line, and we'll data bind to class and set it equal to an object, whereby the key is the conditional class. The value is a Boolean, which we can evaluate. If that Boolean is true, we apply the class. If it's false, we don't apply the class. So I want to give it conditionally a class of active, but only if the current prop is equal to all, because that's what this button signifies. So if the current filter is all, then this right here is the current filter. And I want to style that a bit differently. So I apply the active class to it. I'm going to do something similar for each one of these down here, but this time current must be completed, and then down at the bottom, current must be ongoing. So they only get these active classes if the current value matches what they represent, and therefore only one of them at a time can have that active class. So now let's style this active class down here. I'm just going to paste this in from my repo, and we can see filter nav button dot active, and we give this a slightly darker color. So if I save this, we can see by default, because the current class over here is all, and we pass that in, this right here at the top is true, and therefore we get the active class. Now, if I click on completed, then it updates the value of current, and now this is true. So this gets the active class, and so forth. All right, so now we know which filter is active, and we have this current property down here tracking that filter. Next up, we want to be able to filter the project based on the current filter we have here.